I'm most impressed this man was able to explain all the problems in Diablo 4 without once mentioning Path of Exile. That deserves an award. You know what deserves an award? Path of Exile 2.
5 days, 16 hours, 9 minutes, and 19 seconds. That's how long I played Path of Exile 2.
Guys, I've spent a lot of time in Path of Exile 2 this past week. It's been a good game, man. I've enjoyed it. Should this be a game I get for the holidays? And my answer to them is, do you have any plans on seeing any family over the holidays?
It has been an incredible end of the year for video games, with Path of Exile 2 at the forefront of that.
This game is brutal. It's unforgiving. And I fucking love it.
There's lots of games I like, lots of things I want to invest my time in, but nope, that's not what happened. In fact, I've not managed to pull myself away from this game at all for the past 4 weeks.
Path of Exile 2 is a masterpiece, which I do not say lightly. As a tough critic of video games and media in general, it's hard to say that I'm easily pleased when coming across new video games. We live in a world where it costs a lot of money to purchase these games, but it costs a lot more of our dignity to play them. Gaming has backed us into a corner where we as consumers feel punished for expecting polished and complete products when we buy them. We're supposed to just accept that we got sold on a product that does not exist, and instead we are promised that things will be fixed eventually. But in this particular instance, we get to glorify the exception that should be the rule. So, before I dissect what I believe makes Path of Exile 2 so great, I figured I'd back you up on my history with this kind of genre of video games, which is that I have none. I've never played a God View ARPG or any ARPG for that matter. My typical genre of video games consist of FPS co-op games with the occasional fighter or racing game thrown into the mix. So as someone with no history in ARPG, my opinion may not be as valid as yours. But at the point of me starting this script, I've played 36 hours and have loved almost every single second of it. Also, unless like Minecraft Dungeons counts as an RPG or ARPG, I did play that. That game's a banger. Path of Exile 2 starts you off in an incredible character select menu. Each character representing different classes, all facing their final moments mere seconds away from death on the gallows as the character you selected barely escapes. I bring attention to this menu as it perfectly sets the tone for what's to come in the rest of the early access experience. This game takes no time at all to let you experience the world, the combat, the atmosphere, and all the things you'll need to familiarize yourself with. What I love about this game is that it's so easy to play, but it will cost hundreds of hours of your life in order for you to master it. For my character, I chose the Ranger. A buddy of mine recommended it to me, and sure, starting off, I just really wasn't all that great. Granted, this would have been the case no matter who I chose, and I did take a while to learn how to upgrade my attacks, but that's just part of the early game experience. What stands out during the early game experience is that it's still incredibly enjoyable. The game is punishing enough for it to not feel like a cakewalk at the start. You'll still get overwhelmed quickly, you'll need to learn to navigate situations in a way that best fits your build, so early game I played from a distance, targeting enemies strategically while leaving a big enough gap to ensure I wouldn't die. Upon progressing through Act 1, you'll be introduced to NPCs and how the quest mechanic works. There's always a little hub area for you to teleport back to where you'll have your chest, your storage, your guild chest, and you can meet up with strangers or your guild members. It's a great way to make the experience feel unified with the community while also offering a spot to relax in after taking on some insane bosses. The enemy scaling in this game has been nearly perfected, with not only enemy levels being scaled to location, but also how many people are in your party. I've been running through this game with 2 other friends, all on new characters, and the combat feels perfectly fitted with where we are at in terms of gear and stats. Of course, every once in a while you'll feel a little underleveled or a little overleveled, but for the most part, combat is pretty much toned to exactly where you should be. While exploring dungeons, we come across plenty of enemy variety that always kept us on our toes. We'd explore every corner of every dungeon, making sure we cleared every gold enemy and got whatever loot a low-level character needed. And honestly, we didn't really struggle with much as a team until the Act 1 finale boss fight. So I'm gonna make a comparison here that might be a little far-fetched. Path of Exile 2 is damn near a co-op Elden Ring. There is so much to this game in terms of discovery and progression that perfectly replicates Elden Ring's game design philosophy. Most quests are designed to have you clear out dungeons and open zones in order to familiarize yourself with the game and help you level up enough to be ready for the next big boss encounter. You'll find gear along the way, with the primary satisfaction of boss fights coming from the fact that you beat it after several attempts and had to play near perfectly to do so. So, like I said, the first boss we really struggled with was the Act 1 final boss. This was a boss that made me realize that, yeah, I actually need to have a dedicated build and know how to use it. The boss is equivalent to Diddy pulling up to the kids function. You know it's going to be a bad time, and the odds of you leaving a victim are no less than 100%. Most of the early game was spent experimenting with different damage types, fire, acid, lightning, different move sets, attacks, and all the elemental damages in an attempt to find what worked for me. Thankfully, I settled on lightning. I know it's a bit meta, but dude, is it such a visual treat seeing these just vivid particle effects take my frame rate down from like 60 to 5 because of how much was just going on my screen. Playing through Act 2 led me to not only find my build, but also figuring out how to optimize my role in the party. Each team member can play a role completely different in order to complement each other's gameplay. I like to play the victim, up close and personal to maximize my damage with my lightning rods, alongside my buddy who chose the monk class for high damage. My other friend used his stun build-up with a crossbow from a distance like a virgin bitch. This allowed for us to take heat from any boss while he stayed back to stun him, leaving him open to take even more damage. And I think this level of teamwork is truly where the game shines the most. Each player feels like they are playing to their strengths and complementing your party's playstyle, despite the fact it wasn't actually coordinated. It happened naturally just because everyone's autism just so happened to be synchronized that day. We all played in the builds we wanted to, yet it flawlessly synchronized together. This game creates an opportunity in power fantasy, as well as letting you spec into different options and what traits you would like to specialize in. I mean, dude, look at this skill tree. It's actually insane how much there is to work towards. It's never ending. You're increasing your power with every level and finding better gear the whole way through. I have abandonment issues, so I often find myself getting attached to items in these type of games that offer large loot pools and hardly ever change out gear once I like it. But this game does a great job of giving the player plenty of new gear to upgrade to in order to make it better than your pre-existing gear. But say you are that type of player who gets attached. You can also continue to upgrade the quality of your preferred gear, which allows for you to play the way you want with what you want. So Act 2 of Path of Exile was long, but it was necessary to get you ready for Act 3. Now, I can't say that Act 3 was as hard as Act 2 because by then I've learned the game a bit more, I've started my build, and was pretty much ready to rock. But Act 3 does not fuck around with this enemy variety. It's actually just so peak. I felt like I was coming across completely new enemies in every single area I traveled to, not just reskins, but enemies that actually played completely different from each other. So I had to start playing a bit more defensive instead of always being on the offensive. I'd find myself backed into corners fighting for my life with my flask on empty. There were new movesets that required me to keep my eye on my actual character rather than the enemies around me. I felt like the game shook up what I previously learned and required that I actually think differently in these encounters, which was a great aspect for the final act. The gameplay never gets stale in this game because the second you get bored of it, you can completely switch at any point. You want to go from a lightning to a fire build? All you gotta do is respec your points and try something new. Pick up new types of weapons and give them a run for their money. It feels like this game is truly endless in variety. I went from primarily using my bow to turning it into my secondary for the benefits while using a crossbow built around my best damage stats to pump out even more damage at a faster rate. It's actually crazy how much you could do in this game. It really just feels like you're constantly progressing, you're constantly leveling up, you're constantly being rewarded just for playing. Act 3 has a ton of memorable locations and settings while also providing the most memorable combat encounters of the game. Path of Exile 2 is unlike any game I've ever played before. It's the embodiment of what an ARPG should be and will be the standard expectation for any future ARPG I decide to play. I've heard Diablo 4 is good. Maybe I should try that. Now, I did say I liked almost everything about this game, which is true. The gameplay itself has been perfected. The game is impressively stable for an early access product. The visuals they keep you glued to the screen, as the world is never boring to look at, and the combat is just as addictive and as flashy as anyone could ever hope for. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, this is peak gaming. I haven't gotten hooked on a game like this in a long time, but we gotta just take a second to talk about the few things that I hope that the devs can change or work on in the future. While exploring open zone locations, I can't help but feel like I often run into dead ends with absolutely no point in traveling through them. I try to clear the entire location of enemies before moving forward, and in doing so, there's just a ton of backtracking. This isn't the end of the world, but running and clearing out a long, narrow location just to have to run a minute backwards, it can be sometimes kind of lame. They usually do a good job at keeping the level design looping back into itself to keep the exploration flowing, but unfortunately, when you do hit a hard stop and have to run pretty far back a few dozen times too many, it does start to get old, and I hope that they could continue to work on some of the level flow to keep it going at a good pace. The second thing on my list is having to rediscover the entire map of an area you've already been to. I understand that these areas have different layouts when going back through them to keep the game fresh. They respawn enemies to give you a reason to go back, but I'd recommend giving the player an option to just reload the area with everything reset, or also just give the player the option to go back to the most recent version of that area where they have cleared it out previously. I just feel like having the option there would be nice, so I wouldn't have to rediscover the whole map every time I want to run through it in case I'm missing something for a quest, but I understand at this point it's just part of the game, but hopefully that option does come in eventually. And finally, the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the $13 crab helmet. Microtransactions in this game are wildly overpriced. Now, I know that this game will be free to play, but bro, I'm seeing $80 for a single armor set. $80 is insane for one set, and I can't pretend that it's not. No matter how great this game is, I cannot look past that. Now, thankfully, it's nothing pay to win, and it is all cosmetics. But dude, even if I wanted to buy something to support the devs, I'd be at minimum dropping almost $30 for a full set of an item, which is ridiculous. I know this game will depend on microtransaction income to stay afloat, but including cheaper options is a good way to get people to spend money without feeling the need to drop half the price of a AAA game on one outfit. I would love to buy cool items in this game to support the devs. I mean, this game has blown my expectations out of the water, and it's as close to perfect as you can get. But that doesn't mean I'm looking to spend a ton of money at once if I decide to get an outfit. I hope that they look into making cool items for sale at a much cheaper cost. So with all of that being said, Path of Exile 2, it's a game that just never stops giving. With 3 content-packed acts that took me over 30 hours to complete, an endgame that I'm just getting started, endless builds to experiment with, and an addicting gameplay loop that will keep you coming back over and over again, it's safe to say that this game is truly a masterpiece. I can see myself playing this game for years to come, checking out every single new content drop and welcoming hundreds of hours of peak gameplay with open arms. This game fucking slaps. It's great, a certified banger in the making. It's a game that for once respects us as players, and I genuinely couldn't recommend it enough. I hope that explains why I believe Path of Exile 2 is a complete masterpiece. You need to play it, you need to check it out. It's like crack cocaine. You better go get that shit right now. Thanks for watching. Until next time, piss off, everybody.